Guys, now part of your grade in this class, specifically about 10% of your grade, is going to be coming from a term paper dubbed your scientific essay. Essentially what's going to happen is you're going to research one topic or issue related to environmental science, and you're going to compose a 2-page paper of it using appropriate citations and internet sources. Now, your essay topic can be one of many things. You can choose something very broad and general, such as climate change, food security, poaching or overharvesting, plastic pollution, water uses, any of the subjects or issues in environmental science that we've actually touched on. Or you can do a little bit of research on your own and find a topic that specifically interests you. If you look on the scientific essay tab in your modules package within Canvas, you can see an entire broad list of potential specific topics that you can look through and see which one interests you the most. If you have a topic that you'd really like to talk about but aren't sure whether or not it's going to be approved, go on ahead and email it to me. No problem at all. I will let you know if that topic is acceptable, or if that topic isn't acceptable, we could try to have a discussion over what topics are related to what you want to talk about that is acceptable within the realm of environmental science. Now remember, this assignment is going to be 10% of your grade, so it's a very hefty portion of your grade, and it's really important that you give a lot of effort on this. These scientific papers are typically graded pretty harshly because you have a substantial amount of time to do it and a lot of resources available to you. So the general structure of your paper is going to begin with an introduction, then moving into a background where you offer historical context. You're going to go into some of the issues related to your topic, as well as some solutions, your point of view, where you discuss which solutions are best after weighing the pros and cons and giving available data, and then finally tying up everything in your paper in a conclusion section where you deliver a take-home message. Now, we're going to break down every aspect of this paper, beginning with the introduction and moving all the way down to the conclusions. So first and foremost, you're going to be needing an introduction, basically to introduce your topic to the world. Basically, you're going to be explaining what your topic is and specifically why your topic is significant, particularly within the realm of environmental science. So basically, briefly outline and then frame your essay. Why is this important? What specific issues are you going to be talking about in the body of your work? And also make sure to understand to add a very strong thesis statement. A thesis statement usually appears at the middle or the end of an introductory paragraph, and it's basically a concise summary in one sentence that basically underlines the main point or claim of the essay. In one sentence, if you could basically sum everything up into a nutshell, what is your essay going to be talking about? A good thesis is crucial for you getting a good grade on this term paper. Now, again, this is usually going to be expressed in one sentence, and that statement may be reiterated elsewhere in your paper, particularly in the conclusions. But your thesis statement is basically going to frame the entire context of your paper, and it's extremely important, again, if you want to make a good grade on this term paper. After the introduction, it's really important that you normally have a background paragraph, which basically allows you to add context to your topic or scientific issue. Now, assume your audience, which is going to be me in this case, knows nothing about your topic. Assume I have never heard of what this is, I have no background or prior knowledge to anything you'll be talking about, and so take care within the background paragraph to basically inform your reader of everything they're going to need to know to follow your paper for the rest of the way through. If I don't know what CO2 is, for example, I'm not really going to be able to understand climate change. So basically in your background paragraph, if you're going to be talking about climate change, make sure to underline what greenhouse gases are, perhaps what the Industrial Revolution is, and then you can move into some of the issues related to climate change. Again, that background information is going to be extremely important. Now, in addition to maybe adding a little bit of contextual knowledge or background information, you could also give a history lesson. When did the subject of your paper first appear? When did people start talking about it? Why did it appear in that time frame? What are the circumstances that led to your issue? If it's an environmental issue or an environmental problem, what are its origins? There are a huge number of pieces of information that are typically very vital within the context of a good term paper, simply because it brings your reader up to speed. This is what your background paragraph needs to be. Next is going to be your issues paragraph. Now, for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to treat an issues paragraph as if it were a single paragraph, and in some cases that's going to be the case. Some cases you're not going to have too many diverse topics or issues related to your topic within this environmental paper. However, in other cases, there might be a diverse range of issues that are related to your topic, and you might need 2 or 3 paragraphs to really get into the nuts and bolts of the issues surrounding your topic for this paper. Now, basically for the issues paragraph, you're going to be describing all of the modern day problems associated with your subject. If you want to talk about some of the historical issues associated with your topic, that might be more appropriate in the background paragraph that we just talked about. Now, basically, you're going to be building off of the historical context and the contextual information that you detailed and you lined up in your background paragraph. Then you're going to move forward, go into detail here. Why are these issues or why are these problems such a huge problem? Why should we care about them? What is the big deal going on with your topic? If it's important, why should we care? The entire goal of an issues topic or an issues paragraph is to underline why we should care about this problem. Specifically go into how these issues relate to human health, how it relates to human society, and how it relates to human problems in general. Typically, while certain people do care about the environment for the environment's sake, unfortunately, the vast majority of people typically will only care about the environment as it pertains to them. So in order to get the broadest range of audiences interested in your topic, make sure you underline how your issues pertain directly to human health. If it's a biodiversity loss issue, talk about the benefits of biodiversity that are lost with your paper. If it's climate change, talk about exactly how climate change is going to impact humans. There are a lot of things that you can talk about with your issues. Now, something that we're really trying to underline here is that this is a research paper. You're going to need data. Go in and look up sources, get numbers and statistics, persuade your reader, persuade me why this is important using data, using numbers, and using analytics. Use graphs and charts. Anything that you can use to really get your point across analytically that shows me that you have done your homework. Now, think critically also about the long-term implications of your problem. Don't just talk about the present day or the contemporary issues associated with your topic. Think further. Go beyond this. What's going to happen in the next 15 to 20 years if this continues to be a problem? What's going to happen within the next 100 years? Extrapolate and move forward and think critically about some of the long-term issues related to your topic. So once you've gone over all the issues related to your topic in your issues paragraph or paragraphs, depending on how diffuse and widespread they may be, go into some of the solutions in your solutions paragraph. So what are possible solutions or ways to mitigate the issues related to your topic? And I want you to address solutions at 3 different scales. First and foremost, look at the personal scale or the individual scale. Focus on everyday solutions that we as individuals can make as far as changing our behavior or changing our practices that can reduce the issues or at least the problems associated with your topic. Then move to the local or the community scale. How can we foster grassroots movements in order to expand on those personal practices in order to further alleviate some of the issues resulting from your topic? Finally, look at the government or the global scale. Here, look at different types of policies that we can implement that may have had success in the past in reducing certain issues that are similar to the issues associated with your topic. Look at some different technologies. What are the pros and cons of different technologies? How can they be used to maybe mitigate some of these problems? For each solution that you're going to have, there's also going to be pros and cons associated with each one. Each solution, in other words, are going to have certain benefits associated with it, but they're also going to have certain drawbacks associated with them. And different drawbacks may outweigh one another. One solution you might find might be better than another. It's useful to outline all of the pros and all of the cons associated with each individual solution. And then what we're going to do after that is when we move to our point of view section, you are going to, using your own internal logic, give your opinion on which solution that you find is best. Again, this is a research paper. So every single solution that you're going to look up is going to take a lot of research, and it's going to involve you looking at data and statistics and analytics. Make sure you back up all of your solutions as well as all the pros and cons related to that solution with relevant data and statistics. Then you're going to summarize all of this and then look for the best solution, which you're going to outline in your next paragraph called the point of view paragraph. So the point of view paragraph is where you get to inject your opinion in a logical sense as to what solution is best in your eyes. Remember how you were supposed to weigh the pros and cons of each solution in your solutions paragraph, and you were supposed to back that up with data and statistics in order to support your position. Here is where you get to be the expert in this certain issue or in this topic. You have done all of the research, you have weighed the pros and cons. Now it's time for you to logically give your opinion. So talk about some of the pros and cons again in the solutions that you discussed. Which solution, based on those pros and particularly based on the cons, do you think works best and why? Make sure you think critically about the sources or the choices that you've laid out. Make sure that you have analyzed all of the different viewpoints and perspectives in the best way that you can. Make sure that you defend your response. Make sure that the solution you pick is well researched and you have arrived to that conclusion based on a very good and reliable foundation of logic. And then finally, again, as always, this is a research paper. Give numbers and statistics to defend every point you make. Also keep in mind that this is where we analyze how much that you've actually learned and where you are thinking critically within the context of your research paper. When you are doing your point of view, one of the things that we actually grade on are the 3 points of student learning. So make sure that you're outlining not only why you think a given solution is best, but where your point of view lies and how you arrived to those conclusions based on specific lines of inquiry and specific lines of knowledge that you yourself have researched. Again, we want to make sure that you're actually learning something whenever you're doing these papers, and so it's really important that you illustrate that or do your best to illustrate that, specifically within the point of view paragraph as well as the conclusions paragraph. So finally, we've arrived at the final paragraph of your topic or your paper, and this is going to be your conclusions paragraph. Essentially, here's where you're going to tie everything together. So summarize just a snippet of each of the main ideas of each of your previous paragraphs with basically a single sentence. So give a single sentence summarizing some of the background information that you talked about. Make sure to give a 1 sentence or 2 for each of the issues that you have gone over in your previous paragraphs. Make sure to outline at least a few of the solutions, as well as in your point of view which solution you think is best and why. And then for the final sentence within your conclusions paragraph, make sure you deliver a take-home message. What are the most important things that you think the reader needs to take away from your piece of work? Again, this should be something that ties everything together that you've talked about within a nice pretty bow, and it sort of sends the reader off and ties everything together in a way that is nice, concise, simple, and really sums up the main core message of your paper. So because this is a research paper, you guys are going to be required to do a little bit of research, and that requires going out and getting citations and references. Basically, as you go out and do research on different reliable websites or through your library and looking at different reliable books, you're going to be aggregating pieces of information to put into your research paper. Whenever you present a piece of information, or in any sentence that you present as an outside fact that isn't common knowledge to the reader, something we're going to get into in just a minute here, you're going to be required to have a citation to defend where you got that fact from. Now, what this entails is you're going to be looking at reliable resources, again, either in your book or in the internet. And then for a good research paper, you're going to be injecting those pieces of information into your paper in order to defend your conclusions, to present some facts to the reader, to maybe give some of the context that we were talking about, the background information. Anytime that you have looked up different pieces of information, you're going to be required to cite it. Now, for a good research paper, the minimum is going to be 5 reliable citations, preferably 5 scholarly citations, or reliable citations from an educational website or government website will also work as well. Good papers normally have more than 5. Anytime you have a piece of information, you're going to be required to cite it. So normally for a good 2-page research paper, you're going to have closer to 10. The more you have, the better, period. It just means you've done your homework, and it means that you've really put a lot of effort into this paper. Note that your textbook does not count. If you cite your textbook as a reliable source, you will lose at least 5 points. It's a research paper. This doesn't require you to go through a book where everyone's already aggregated a ton of data from. If you see a piece of information in your book that you want to include in your research paper, great. If you absolutely feel the need to include that piece of information, look it up on an additional website to bolster where you got that information from your book as a way of almost defending it further. And you can maybe cite that internet source. But if you go on ahead and just cite your textbook, you're going to get points off. It doesn't count as a research paper citation, it doesn't count as a source, and it just means you're being lazy. So again, remember, don't cite your book. Just go on the internet, go to your library, get different pieces of information on the internet or any other reliable source. Cite those. Don't just be lazy and just cite your textbook. So it can be a little scary and it can be a little confusing doing a paper for the first time, a research paper in particular that involves citations. So we're actually going to walk you through how to look up relevant information for your papers and specifically how to do an in-text citation as well as a bibliography citation. It's really not that hard. It takes a minute, it takes a little bit of practice, but it's honestly pretty straightforward. So first and foremost, we're going to need a topic. And for the purposes of this little exercise, say that our topic for our scientific paper is climate change. And specifically, we are interested in learning how much hotter the Earth has gotten since the Industrial Revolution. So a great resource for whenever you're doing an internet search for scholarly and reliable information is to go on ahead and use Google Scholar. Literally, all you do is type Scholar into Google, click the first link, and you will go to the Google Scholar page. The difference between Google Scholar and just regular Google is that Google Scholar actually aggregates and presents reliable, peer-reviewed, and scientifically published work. So it's far more reliable, and every source that you find on Google Scholar is going to be something that's acceptable for the purposes of this class, right? So we type into Google Scholar a few keywords, climate change, total temperature increase, and then we'll throw in global just to make it a little more holistic, just in case we wind up with some like random temperature increase in some town. So just a few basic keywords to get to what we want. Next, whenever you type that in, just like any other Google search, you're going to find a bunch of links, except in this case, instead of a bunch of different random websites for Google Scholar, you will get links to scientific papers. So we look through a few of them. We find modern global climate change. This looks like a citation that might have the information that we want. So we go on ahead and click on the link to that source. Now, for most of the websites that you're going to be going to within Google Scholar, there's going to be a few paywalls. You can actually get around this. If you go online in any academic institution, so Gulf Coast State College, for example, if you go to their library and log in through their library, you will have access to just about every scientific journal, every peer-reviewed paper you could ever possibly want. So go through your librarians, and if you have a question as to how to get there or how to get beyond the paywall, go on ahead and ask the librarians. They will know every bit of information as to how to navigate within Google Scholar, and they can help you out pretty easily. So you're going to click on modern climate change. We think that might be a good paper, so let's start with that. We go in and we see the paper. So the abstract will tell us exactly what's going to be going on in this paper, and we're going to look for pieces of information that are related to our information of interest. Specifically, we're looking for information on how much hotter the Earth has gotten since the Industrial Revolution. So we go through, and eventually, as we're going through the paper, we see this awesome graph where they're looking at departures from 1860, about the time of the Industrial Revolution, all the way up to the modern times. In the case of this paper, it was published in 2003, so they have data all the way up to 2003. And if you look, you see very clearly on the graph that as of 2003, the average global temperature had increased by about 0.5 degrees Celsius. So we take that, we look at the graph, and we can actually include the graph in our papers if we want as an auxiliary example. However, whenever you include a graph or another statistic, just like you would any other piece of information, just throw a little citation on the bottom so that we know that you're not plagiarizing. Now that we have our information that we want, we simply note or we write in our paper that as of 2003, the mean global temperature had increased by approximately 0.5 degrees Celsius. Really straightforward. Now that we have the information we want, we're going to need to actually learn how to cite this information. So citing your sources, when you cite your sources, you're going to be citing them in two specific ways. First and foremost, it's going to be in-text citations. And in-text citations are the little citations within your actual paper, and they're going to be right at the end of any given sentence. So remember that when we are adding our piece of information, the piece of information in question was, as of 2003, mean global temperature had increased by approximately 0.5 degrees Celsius. Whenever we do that, in parentheses at the end of that piece of information, we simply add the citation. For an in-text citation, that's going to be the author, the main author's last names, and then comma, then the year it was published. So for a single author, it's going to be last name, year of publication. So if you were citing me, it would be Hyman 2019. If you had two authors, it would be Hyman, the little and symbol, not A-N-D and, but the actual little symbol that you have on your keyboard, Hyman and example Johnson 2019. And if you have three or more authors, it's going to be Hyman et al. Dot comma and then the year again. So you're always going to have the year of publication, and then how many authors, depending on how many authors you have, it can be a little finicky, but you can always refer back to this lecture and the slides if you're ever confused, or our Purdue, which is a resource that we actually give you on the in the directions, is a fantastic resource if you're ever confused. Moving forward, you're also going to need to include this citation in your bibliography. Now, there is a very finicky process to add a citation if you're using a bibliography, specifically with APA format. You can go through that. It's going to be first author, last name, first initial, the second author, etc., all the way down to however many authors you have, the year published, the title of the resource, and then where it was retrieved from. All well and good. Or you can sidestep all of that if you're using Google Scholar, because they have an auto-cite function. So going back to that modern climate change link that we looked up when we were Googling Google Scholar, notice that on the bottom right, or notice that on the bottom left-hand side of that little icon, or that little link, is a quotes icon. So it's circled right there on the bottom of this slide. When you click on that, it's really cool. It will bring up the auto-cite citations. Notice that it's got the last name of the author, the first initials of the author, the year cited in parentheses, the title of the author, and where it was retrieved from. It has everything you could possibly want. All you do here is you copy that link or you copy that information, and then you just paste it into your bibliography. Problem solved, everything is done for you. So again, you can look up OWL Purdue, the link is there and it's super easy to follow, but if you don't even want to mess with it and you're using Google Scholar, everything is literally done for you. So this is essentially how you're going to be citing a piece of information using Google Scholar or using internet resources. If you're going to be using a book or something that's more manual, obviously you're going to have to go through the steps in OWL Purdue, but if you're using the internet, everything is completely done for you and it is so easy. So lastly, before we get back into where it is appropriate to cite and where it's not necessarily appropriate to cite, just a little note on paraphrasing. Definitely always paraphrase whenever you're doing a scientific paper or a research paper. Don't directly quote. I cannot tell you how many times that we have seen students that just insert these enormously long quotes where they have just copied and pasted and then added quotes directly into a research paper. And they do it, it's pretty cut and dry. It's pretty straightforward. They do it simply to eat up extra space. There's only going to be a 2-page paper. So if you have an entire paragraph that's a direct copy and paste, it's taking up an enormous amount of space. We see right through that. Don't do that. We will deduct at least 10 points right off the top. It's complete laziness and it shows a lack of innovation on the student's part. Please avoid this. Instead of quoting, go on ahead and paraphrase. So for example, when you see a piece of information that you research, break it down and then translate into a usable form and then add a citation at the end. Similar to what we did when we took the image of the graph and then we extracted usable information out of it and then added a citation. So for example, when you're talking about, say, for example, rehabilitation and restoration of land, and you find this nice long quote, you would take the chunks of that, you would take the direct quote and you would break it down into a usable form, and then you would add a citation with the last name of the author and then the year. Again, don't directly take a huge chunk of information and throw quotes around and add it into your paper. We will take 10 points off the top. It's complete laziness. Actually go and take the time to translate that information into a usable form that you can then integrate into the body of your work. Now, next, we're just going to go into where it is appropriate for you to add a citation and then where it might not necessarily be very appropriate. Basically, citations and references are required for every sentence that you present as an outside fact to the reader, which isn't common knowledge. Remember that common knowledge are just general pieces of information that it's assumed that everyone knows. Things like the sky is blue, cows eat grass, dogs and cats are common pets. Things that you know without a shadow of a doubt that your reader is going to implicitly know and understand. However, contrast that with something called specific facts and knowledge. And these are facts and pieces of information which are specific to your topic, and it's not necessarily understood or could be assumed that a general audience member is going to know that piece of information. For example, it might not be a piece of common knowledge that 140,000 people die from mosquito-related illnesses each year. That might not be something that you can really assume that your reader is going to share with you in understanding and knowing that knowledge, or that 3 in 5 people are overweight in the United States. That's a very specific fact. Whenever you present a specific fact within a scientific paper or within a research paper, you need to back it up. And this is where you use citations. Anytime that you've gone out and done research, that research is normally going to have a conclusion, or it's going to have reliable pieces of information. By using their reliable pieces of information, by leaning on their knowledge and what they have aggregated in those different pieces of information that you have looked up and researched, you now have additional credibility that you can pass off to the reader. So note that if you are unsure of something, so if you don't know whether a piece of information is common knowledge or whether it requires a citation, do it anyway. You won't be penalized for adding citations to common knowledge. You will be penalized for not having proper citations in areas where you need it. So when in doubt, just go ahead and add the citation anyway. You will not be penalized for it, and it's better to have one and not need it than need one and not have it. So briefly, we're also just going to go into what are acceptable citations and sources, and then what are not acceptable citations and sources. So the preferred citations and sources that we would like you to use are what are called scholarly sources. And these refer to those peer-reviewed journals that we were talking about whenever we were using Google Scholar. Google Scholar, every Google Scholar link that you are going to find on that website is going to be a website or a source that we will find acceptable and actually preferable. If you use Google Scholar to find all of your information, every source that you're going to be using is scholarly. You will be fine. It's a much safer way to go. However, we also will accept what are called trustworthy or reliable sources. And these are sources that refer to reputable organizations or entities which are very credible. And these could be things like any government or any academic or educational institution. So anything that has a .edu is acceptable. Anything that has a .gov is acceptable. Normally because those are very credible institutions. So Florida Fish and Wildlife's website is a fine citation or fine source. NOAA is a great source to have, or Florida FDP. These are all examples of government entities or pseudo-academic institutions that are going to be credible sources of information. So again, if it's got a .edu on it, great. If it's got a .gov on it, great. Those are going to be sources that you can use. However, there are multiple non-credible or non-acceptable sources that we will actually dock you points for if you use. That's why we're actually going into detail here with this lecture to make sure that you don't mess up here. So non-acceptable sources are going to be Wikipedia, blogs, or any website ending in .com or .org. If you use a .org or you use a .com by simply going out and Googling information and clicking on the first link that you find and citing it, we are going to dock you points for that. Those are non-acceptable. That is poor research, and so you're going to lose a lot of points here. The only exception with a .com or a .org are the websites that you find in Google Scholar. The website links to certain peer-reviewed journals have a .org or a .com instead of a .edu, and if you find it on Google Scholar, we will accept it. That's completely fine. That is a sort of a loophole or a little bit of ambiguity there. If you use regular Google and you find a link, it will not be acceptable and you will be docked at least 3 points. So this is really important to know. A research paper requires quality research, and that requires you to use acceptable quality sources. So as far as grading goes, it would be useful to probably go into a little bit about how I'm going to be grading your paper or project. We've mentioned a little bit about where we were going to be docking off points, namely when you copied and pasted huge chunks of information like those direct quotes, when you used improper sources, or when you, for example, if you plagiarized. There's also going to be a grading rubric where we have all of the detailed information about where we are going to be grading and how we are going to be grading and where we are going to award or take off points. If you follow that very carefully structured information about like the introduction paragraph, the background paragraph, moving all the way through your issues, solutions, point of view, and the conclusions, if you follow that to a T, you're going to be fine and there's no need to worry. But definitely review the rubric as you are writing your paper to make sure that you are on the right track. You can also email it to me. If you want to, you will get no points docked at all if you email me a rough draft before you actually submit it via Turnitin on the due date. If you submit it to me, give me at least a week to review it, so send it to me a week before the actual deadline. I am happy to provide constructive criticism, comments, anything that might keep you in the direction or point you in the direction to get a very good grade on the paper. So literally you can send it in without any fear of any poor grading or to get any negative points taken off. I can look over it for you and I can show you the way to go or point you in the direction to get a better grade or to improve your paper so that you get a good grade on the final submission. So there's going to be a due date. It changes every semester, so it wouldn't make a lot of sense to actually have it in the lecture video since it changes from semester to semester, but it's going to be listed within your modules. Normally this is going to show up toward the end of the course, so it's going to be in module 4. And again, just so you know, it's going to be submitted via Turnitin, so it's going to check for plagiarism. If you do too many direct quotes, it will mark off, and if you have too many blatant plagiarized notes, basically if you copy and pasted information from any website source without giving it an adequate citation, the Turnitin software will note that, flag it, and if you have more than about 40% of your paper as direct quotes or plagiarized, we will actually give you a 0. Don't do that. Do all of your paraphrasing, don't do any of the direct quotes, and always, always, always cite your sources. You don't want to plagiarize. It's super not cool. A lot of people took pains to aggregate that information for you in those sources that you were looking up. Publishing papers takes a huge amount of energy, and so whenever you just blatantly take someone else's work and pass it off as your own, it's super uncool, and just don't do it. So just as a final note, you can send me your rough draft about 1 week prior to the final submission. Just give me a little bit of time here and I can point you in the right direction. If you have any questions about any of this material that we've talked about so far, I know this lecture was about twice as long as most of them actually are. Just email me. It's absolutely fine. I'm happy to walk you through any ambiguities and clarify any outstanding issues. So that's all we have for today. Again, I hope you guys have a great time actually getting to do these scientific papers and these research papers. It should be a lot of fun if you do it right, and I look forward to reading all of your papers. All right, take care.